वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचार्यम यमुना तीर वनचार्य यमुना जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जयम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद् भाई चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की नित्य लीला प्रविष्ट भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर की श्रील गौर किशोर दास बाबाजी महाराज की सच्चित आनंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की गौड़ीय वेदांत आचार्य बलदेव विद्याभूषण प्रभु की श्री विश्वनाथ चक्रवर्ती ठाकुर की श्री नरोत्तम दास ठाकुर की श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्ट दास रघुनाथ षड गोस्वामी प्रभु की अनंत कोटि वैष्णवृंद की नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की श्री वृंद देवी गंगा देवी जमुना देवी भक्ति देवी की श्री वृंदावन धाम की मथुरा धाम की मायापुर नवद्वीप धाम की श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की श्री द्वारकापुरी धाम की श्री अयोध्यापुरी धाम की हरि नाम संकीर्तन की गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल समावेत भक्तवृंद की समावेत भक्तवृंद की समावेत भक्तवृंद की श्रील प्रभुपाद की हरे कृष्ण नमाओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनीति नामने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश धारणे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भागवतीत्युत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी Srimad Bhagavatam, Skanda 2, Adhyaya 3, Shloka, doesn't give the number, Gata, 20. 20. Bile Bato Rukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Dardurike Vasuta Nachopagatyu Urugaya Gataha Bile Bato Rukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Dardurike Vasuta Nachopagatyu Gataha. Yeah. Bile Bato Rukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Darudirke Vasuta Nachopagayat Yurugaya Gataha Bile Baro Rukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Darurike Vasuta Nachopagayat Yurugaya Gataha Bile Batorukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Darudike Vasuta Nachopagayat Yurugaya Gataha Bile Batorukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Dardurike Vasuta Nachopagayat Yurugaya Gataha Bile Batorukrama Vikramanye Nashrinvatach Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Dardurike Vasuta Chopagayat Yurugaya Gataha. Ladies? Nobody? Bile Batorukrama Vikramanye Karnapute Narasya Jivasati Dardurike Vasuta Chopagayat Yurugaya Gataha Padapataha Bile snake holes Bata like Urukrama the Lord who acts marvelously Vikraman prowess yea all these na never Shrinvataha heard. Karnapute, the ear holes. Narasya, of the man. Jibha, tongue. Asati, useless. Dardurika, of the frogs. Eva, exactly like that. Sutta, O Sutta Goswami. Na, never. Cha, also. Upagayati, chants loudly. Urugaya, worth singing. Gataha, songs. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Purport. Devotional service to the Lord is rendered by all limbs or parts of the body. It is the transcendental dynamic force of the spirit soul. Therefore, a devotee is engaged 100% in the service of the Lord. One can engage in devotional service when the senses of the body are purified in relation with the Lord. And one can render service to the Lord with the help of all the senses. As such, the senses and the action of the senses are to be considered impure or materialistic as long as they are employed only in sense gratification. The purified senses are also engaged not in sense gratification but in the service of the Lord in toto. The Lord is the supreme with all senses, and the servitor who is part and parcel of the Lord also has the same senses. Service to the Lord is the completely purified use of the senses as described in the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord imparted instructions with full senses, and Arjuna received them with full senses. And thus there was a perfect exchange of sensible and logical understanding between the master and the disciple. Spiritual understanding is nothing like an electrical charge from the master to the disciple, as foolishly claimed by some propaganda mongers. Everything is full of sense and logic, and the exchange of views between the master and the disciple is possible only when the reception is submissive and real. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that one should receive the teaching of Lord Chaitanya with intellect and full senses so that one can logically understand the great mission. In the impure state of a living being, the various senses are fully engaged in mundane affairs. If the car is not engaged in the service of the Lord, if the ear is not engaged in the service of the Lord by hearing about him from the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, certainly the holes of the ear will be filled with some rubbish. Therefore, the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam should be preached all over the world very loudly. That is the duty of a pure devotee who has actually heard about them from the perfect sources. Many want to speak something to others, but because they are not trained to speak on the subject matter of Vedic wisdom, they are all speaking nonsense, and people are receiving them with no sense. There are hundreds and thousands of sources for distributing mundane news of the world, and people of the world are also receiving it. Similarly, the people of the world should be taught to hear the transcendental topics of the Lord. And the devotee of the Lord must speak loudly so that they can hear. The frogs loudly croak, with the result that they invite the snakes to eat them. The human tongue is especially given for chanting the Vedic hymns and not for croaking like frogs. The word asati, used in this verse, is also significant. Asati means a woman who has become a prostitute. A prostitute has no reputation for good womanly qualities. Similarly, the tongue which is given to the human being for chanting the Vedic hymns will be considered a prostitute when engaged in chanting some mundane nonsense. Heavy. What are the lessons here? You can give the lecture. The lesson is that we should chant the Vedic hymns. And how do you do that? By studying the Vedas under the Guru. That's really Guru Shishya. We don't have that exactly. Whether you can blame Vaishnavism or not, I don't know. But in India, if you lived in India, which I have for a long time, there are traditional gurukuls. There's a Vedic educational syllabus. It exists today. It exists today. Believe it or not. But it's mentioned in the Bhagavatam. 10, 45, 33, 34, 35, and 36. Manu, who went to the Gurukul? Lord Krishna and Balaram. Why? Do they need to go to a Gurukul? No. They're Isha Avatara. Isha Avatara, the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. Why should they go to a Gurukul? And what did they learn in the Gurukul? What Prabhupada has written here, the Vedic hymns. Did Prabhupada force Westerners to study the Vedic hymns? No, didn't. Why? Adverse. Just like learning Sanskrit is tough. We don't want to learn it. Right? We changed our dress, we changed our food, we changed our name, we changed our religion. We don't want to change our language. Why? We should all be communicating in Sanskrit, but we're not. Okay, there's a gap between the ideal and the reality. There's a big gap. To actually be fully ideal, difficult, isn't it difficult? Fully ideal means we should stop eating and drinking. At the end of his life, Prabhupada was lying in a bed in Vrindavan. Who read the Prabhupada biography? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I was not there. I admit I was in Hyderabad. I wasn't in Vrindavan. But Prabhupada lied on a bed for months. And one of the things he said, I wanted to give up these animal activities of eating and sleeping, and now I can give them up. One of my personal friends, not a very close friend, is about to leave his body in Vrindavan. You might have heard his name, Kadamba Kanana Swami. He stopped eating. He's only drinking water. That's what Parikshit did, isn't it? When you learn that you're going to die after a week, you stop eating and drinking also. I don't think he drank water also, right? That's the story. We can't give it up. We are not on that level of perfection. But what is the path of perfection? If we believe what Prabhupada wrote here today, then we should be chanting the Vedic hymns. What are the hymns of the Vedas? The Veda mantras. The Vedas themselves. And, there's a lot of devotees, they'll tell you, no need of studying the Vedas. Vedaischa sarvera hameva vedyaha. If you know me, you know all the Vedas. Fine. But Lord Krishna set the example. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Prabhupada wanted to revive Vedic culture, and that's why he gave the Yagnopavit. It is shocking that so-called followers of Vedic culture who write Swami means sannyasi. Sannyasi is a part of Varnashram who rubbish Varnashram. It's going on. How can you be a Swami and rubbish Varnashram? Well, there are sannyasis. There was a philosopher in India who died in 1990, but he became very famous, right? Rajneesh. You heard his name. And 1990, some of you weren't even born, right? And what he did, he said, all my disciples are sannyasis and they should all copulate together. It means have sex. How can a sannyasi have sex? Sannyas means you give up sex. Sannyas ashram, it's actually for the end of life. 75 years of age, you get ready to die. So for preaching, Prabhupada gave young men sannyas, and a number of them couldn't maintain. And what did Prabhupada do? Get out, we don't want you, you're a fallen soul. No. Live in our society, be a householder. He understood. Actually, sannyas is only for Brahmins, not for Vaishyas, Kshatriyas, and Shudras. It is only for Brahmin. Does that mean born a Brahmin? No. Brahma, what is a Brahmin? Janmana Jayate Shudra. You heard this, right? Everyone is born a Shudra. Everyone. Sanskaro bhavate dvijaha. By the Yagnopavit sanskar, you get a second birth. I got into trouble because I quoted the Bhagavatam and said that Yagnopavit sanskar is not for the women. Now this is going out to the world. I'm not going to change my position for the Americans. Prabhupada didn't want to change his position for the Americans. Yagnopavit is the beginning of Vedic study. Without the thread, you cannot study the Vedas. That's the tradition. Who started that tradition? Rishis and Munis. Prabhupada wrote in his purports, the Rishi, read the purport to Gita 16.7. Nobody wants to follow the sages. The sages are the ones who saw the Vedic mantras. There's no human origin. Apparosheha. So the Vedas are supposed to be studied. It's not that you can say Vedaischa sarvera hameva vedya. We don't need to study the Vedas. If you want to become a Brahmin, Veda patat bhaved vipra. Janmana jayate shudra sanskaro bhavate dvijaha. Veda patad. Literally it means by studying the Vedas. And what is the system for studying the Vedas? It's all over India. It still exists. But it's going down. Kshitilayate, it's going away. Why? Kali Yuga. Prabhupada said the ancestors of the Europeans were the Kshatriyas who were driven out of India by Parashuram. You heard that, right? You heard it. You heard it. Who else heard that? Mostly everybody here heard that. So the Kshatriyas also had the Yagnopavit, and they also studied the Vedas. And if Krishna and Balaram and Sudama studied Vedas and Upanishads, Anvikshikim, Vedangas, it's all mentioned 10, 45, 33, 34, 35, 36. What Krishna and Balaram studied in Avanti, which is today Ujjain, Avantipur. Where was Sandipani from? Take a guess. Yeah. Where was he from? Okay, you took a guess. You are incorrect. It's in the Bhagavatam. Yeah. Where was Sandi? Was he from Avanti? You guessed correctly. Kashi. Banaras. It's written in the Bhagavatam. Sandipani was from Kashi. He came to Avanti. Gargamuni gave the Yagnopavit to Krishna and Balaram, and they studied Vedic educational syllabus in Avanti with Sandipani. So Prabhupada has written it here. Prabhupada could have said there is no need to study the Vedic hymns. The opposite he wrote. We must study the Vedic hymns. Are we doing it? He may be meant for some future generation. When people realize that modern education, Prabhupada trashed, he used the word here, rubbish, right? Prabhupada used rubbish. Some people say Prabhupada's language was ungentlemanly. Rascals, rubbish. Pardon? Nonsense. There's nonsense in today's purport. Prabhupada was fearless. Modern education is a slaughterhouse of the mind. Right? You heard that, right? Who heard that? Prabhupada said that. Everybody. And yet, we are embracing modern education. We means as a society. ISKCON Baroda didn't do it. But in Mayapur, we have modern education alongside the Gurukul. The whole India is surrendering to modern education. Today, I was talking on the phone with a devotee in Mayapur. I won't mention his name. And I was telling him in the in our meeting, he was in the meeting, I was in the meeting, I won't mention the name of the meeting. Somebody showed a picture full of billionaires, Indian billionaires, who have been made members of a consultative group for Mayapur, right? Some of them actually came to Mayapur. All of them, except for two, have a suit and a tie. The point is that the Hindus became enamored by Western ethos, Western culture. IIT. How many of you heard of the IIT? You two, three, you heard of the IIT? You heard of it? Indian Institute of Technology. The highest educational institute in India. You don't know about that? I'm joking, right? It's like Georgia Tech, right? Like Georgia Tech. I'm just joking around here. We ourselves are enamored. Oh, yeah. What to do? This is society that we live in. Boy, you know, in 1974, after the Mayapur festival, we were in Vrindavan, and 400 devotees had come from all over the world, and Prabhupada shocked everyone. Shocked. All of you have to stay 1 more month, 2 more months, I think it was. 1 or 2 months more. Everyone was getting ready to go back to their respective Australians, Germans, Americans, Canadians, whatever, to learn Varnashram. Half of you go to Mayapur from Vrindavan. And the other half to Bombay for civil disobedience. You know civil disobedience? Well, this town is famous for that. Dr. Martin Luther King. He's from Atlanta. He led the civil disobedience movement in America, inspired by Gandhiji. When he gave the I Have a Dream speech, look, it's on YouTube. Everyone, there's 25 people with Gandhi caps. Yeah, it's a fact of history. So, Prabhupada adopted civil disobedience in Juhu because the Sheriff of Bombay was an honorary post that had no political power, right? Was left over from the British administration pre-1947. He issued a proclamation. The Kirtan of ISKCON at Juhu is a nuisance. You ever heard this story? Yeah, it's a true story. And we all went on Kirtan, 150 devotees every day. He sent us in the Juhu area to do civil disobedience. We'll show them by Kirtan. Anyway, the aim of, why should you learn the Vedas? And the system of learning Vedas was to memorize the mantras. Ishavasyamidam sarvam. That's a Vedic mantra from Vedas, from Shukla Yajurveda. And you have to repeat twice. The Guru says, Ishavasyamidam sarvam. You have to repeat Ishavasyamidam sarvam, Ishavasyamidam sarvam. That's the system. Memorization, rote in English, right? Rote. And what is it in Sanskrit? Don't know, right? Avartanam, rote. Again and again, repeat. Then you memorize. Data entry. Just like you put the data into the database, and it's there in the computer, you can use it anytime. So when the mantras are in your head, your whole life you have that storehouse of Vedic knowledge. Theoretically, I understand this. Did I do it? Excuse me. That's what they go in front of the deities, hold their ears and bow down like this. Excuse me. Yeah, there's so many. Because we didn't memorize the mantras of the Vedas, or memorize the Gita, or memorize the Bhagavatam. There were people in India, right? They memorized the whole Mahabharata, whole Ramayana. No? Yes or no? No? You know, there are people that did it. Avadhanam, you keep it situated in your head. That was the aim. Now there are brilliant people, right? They memorize or they understand conceptually quantum physics we were talking about. I was talking about. Instead of all that, you would memorize Vedas. And then there were 1,000 branches of the Veda. Shaka. Veda Shaka. Now there's only a few left. Like the Krishna Yajurveda and the Shukla Yajurveda, those aren't Shakas. They're divisions, but inside that, there's a Kanva Shaka of the Shukla Yajurveda in South India. But North India, it's Mandhyandina Shaka, the branch. And then the Rig Veda, there's Rayaniya, and I forgot the branches. I had learned them. There's branches of all the Vedas. That was the subject of study in India, in Bharata. That's what made the country great, Vedic. Study of Vedas, memorization of Vedas, and the ideals that are expressed in the mantras, like cow protection, for instance. There's a Go Suktam. You know what is Suktam? Su Uktam, a good saying. That's it. Su, good, Uktam was said. So what else did Prabhupada? So you lived your whole life and you gained mundane knowledge. Then at the end of life, what's the benefit of that? But if you studied Vedas and your mind is always filled with Veda mantras, then you will attain the supreme. Because at the end of life, you'll think of those mantras. Plus, then there was the occupation of teaching, which is considered the highest occupation. So, okay, this is an emergency period. Vedic culture is going away. You're distributing the books with the hope that people will read it and be inspired to revive Vedic culture. That's the ultimate aim of it, right? The aim of it. But at the same time, there needs to be a Raja, a king. So the whole Gita is like that. Evam parampara praptam, imam raja shayo viduhu. The whole Bhagavatam, all the Puranas narrate stories of kings who followed the Vedic system. They studied Vedas. They had Vedic culture in the kingdom. And that culture was thousands of years old and was based on how you should live in the material world for a few years and get ready to go to try and get moksha, a liberation from the repetition of birth and death. Why is that? Because human life is very rare. And we got the human body somehow. And special intelligence is given to human beings. But 99.9% of human society is using it to live like an animal, isn't it? They don't know there's that word, I think I mentioned it before, digbrantihi. Dik means the directions and brantihi means confusion. Wherever they turn, they're confused. There's no guidance in society. The kings used to supply that guidance by maintaining the brahmanas, by bowing down to the brahmanas. That was how Vedic kings were. Do I have a watch? Yeah. See the time. This goes till...
Well, you could go till 8:35, 8:40, or it's all the way until 9, so you can leave time for questions if you like.
Right. Okay, let me go through the purport again. Prabhupada talked about a prostitute having no good womanly qualities. And yet there were prostitutes in the Vedic times. How is that? Because in the material world, everybody will not be perfect. In fact, most of the people are imperfect, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago, right? Who is perfect? I mean, Gita says, right? Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Out of thousands of men, hardly one will strive for perfection, right? Manushyanam, of men, sahasreshu, in the middle of thousands, kaschid, one, yatati, endeavors, siddhaye, for perfection. Yatatam, of those who have striven, those who strove, who endeavored. Yatatam api siddhanam. Kaschin mam veti tatvataha. Out of thousands who strove for perfection, few will become perfect. And out of those who became perfect, few will know who is Ishvara, Krishna. So very few, it seems, now in India, Prabhupada, we were walking on the Juhu beach, right? And Prabhupada said in India, more or less everyone is Krishna conscious, but they are being artificially checked by the government. So Prabhupada criticized government policy. And what was the government policy? Modern education. The kind of money the Indian government spent on modern education, right? Recently, I went to the IIT in Himachal Pradesh in October. Seems like yesterday. What is it, 5 months now? Beginning of October. October, November, December. 5 months. 1,500 crores of rupees the government spent to... That was the construction. I don't know, maybe the land that they purchased. It was 20 kilometers away from the Mandi town. And in the hill area, 20 kilometers takes a half an hour to go there. 1,500 crores of rupees to build the IIT. And there are two campuses. There's the South Campus and the North Campus. So this is just one example of how the leaders of the world, instead of encouraging Vedic culture, are giving up Vedic culture and spending good money to give it up. One thing we see that the older generation in India was very religious, but it's decreasing day by day. Why? Because modern education, there's no dharma. There is no religious education, right? There's no Gita, no Bhagavatam, no nothing. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are the four aims of human life, the Purusharthas. Purushartha means human endeavor. So what should humans endeavor for? So according to the Vedic concept, first you should learn dharma. Whatever you become, except Shudras, there's no dharma. There's no education for Shudras. It was for Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. There was one boy in Vrindavan Gurukul who was not interested in study. Prabhupada personally brought him to Hyderabad, put him on the farm. If you cannot study, if you're not interested or you don't have the inclination, work on the farm. Shudra was actually, agriculture was the industry. Now all these industries are there. They're tamasic, right? They're what's the word? How do you describe it? Ugra karma, thank you. Exactly. Perfect. Horrible. Ugra means horrible. People, thousands and thousands of people have to hear ting, 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 ting. Engines, even now here you have to hear it. There's highways here, highways there. It's crazy. No peace. The old days, there were bullock carts, maybe chariots, a few horses, bulls pulling the carts. Peaceful. Modern society, there's no peace. You're running. Prabhupada, he gave this example. The dog or the animals run on 4 legs and we're running on 4 wheels. What's the difference? So this Ugra Karma, the aim of modern education, Yantra Vidya, knowledge of machines, so that you can have Ugra Karmas and you earn money and you live comfortably. Well, everybody wants to live comfortably, but comfortably may be living in a hut also. Somebody living in a hut may be living comfortably. Doesn't have to have a big house. Anyway, so modern education propagates this idea of an industrialized society. An industrialized society means peace is shattered. Peace is shattered. And the poor labor class people, instead of working out in the fields, fresh air and exercise, and then producing something that's, a human requirement, which is food grains and cotton for cloth. In the factory, most of the stuff is useless, isn't it? You go in these malls. Well, we were walking in the mall. It was cold, right? And we were going to a nearby mall to walk 45 minutes to an hour. There's nothing so useful that you get in this mall. I mean, we have our clothes, but they have fashion. You should... It's not utilitarian. It's a waste of human effort. When really, annad bhavanti bhutani. Human society exists because of food grains. Human beings need to eat. So agriculture, now they have machines for agriculture. So that put thousands of people out of jobs. Maybe those people weren't getting paid, but at least they had, fresh air, exercise, a roof over their head, and food. There was a food for work culture. Anyway, it could be a complicated discussion, There were no hospitals and no modern educational institutions. There were grama vaidyas, doctors in every village who used, we hear it's called herbal medicine. In India, herbal medicine. Jari Booty in Hindi. Those things found in nature that have curative abilities. That was given when people face disease. And this system went on for thousands of years. So we didn't finish all of the things imparted with full senses. Prabhupada dwelt on that in the purport. Arjuna had his full senses. Krishna had his full senses. Krishna is Rishikesha. He's the Lord of the senses, Rishikesha, right? Lord of the senses. And if you're not ill, there's some people blind, they learn Vedic knowledge by hearing. If you're deaf, then it's difficult to learn Vedic knowledge. But if you're blind, you can still hear Veda mantras. But if you have full senses, you can fully concentrate on the message of Vedic literature. If you don't, if you're intoxicated, for example, intoxication is so popular. Why? Because atheistic concept. Because modern society, modern education is spreading atheism. That was actually the difference between the US and Russia, right? Russia had adopted communism. China's theoretically a communist government. There are other countries, Cuba, and the people have faith in God, but the government doesn't. So the government doesn't encourage dharma. But that's the first thing, and the Purusharthas I started and then I got into a tangent. The first thing is to learn what is dharma. If you can learn what is dharma in the childhood, well, you have to be taught. Not that it comes on its own. That the guru is required, right? Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. So you have to upadekshanti, take jnanam jnaninaha tatvadarshinaha. You have to go to somebody who learned Vedas. When they say Gyani, what does it mean? Is it an old man with a beard? But that's how in India even Gyani is projected. What is a Gyani? Or they even here in some of the comics, they show someone sitting on a mountain with a long beard and he's supposed to be the sage. But actually a Gyani is someone who did Vedadhyayanam, who studied Vedas in the childhood. and memorized one Veda. Some, they memorized two, Dvivedi. Some memorized three Vedas, Trivedi. And all four Vedas, Chaturvedi. Right? In Mathura, there are a lot of Chaturvedis. Chobe. But actually, a Chaturvedi, he had to study all four Vedas. Study meant memorize it. Trivedi memorized three. So these things were titles that were given to honor people who had learned Vedas, who had learned Vedic literature. They were honored in society. Today, who's honored in society? Sports figure, charitable for modern education and hospitals, political leaders, Gandhiji. You know, they had a statue in every town of India of Gandhi. And Prabhupada commented that the statue outside, the birds defecate on the statues. So they're actually dishonored, not honored. And now they're building big deities of even Ramanujacharya just now in Hyderabad. I went there. And it's against a Vedic concept. Prabhupada clearly said, not only him, but that was a tradition, that there shouldn't be a deity standing outside because the birds will defecate on the deity. But imitation of the West, the Sardar Patel statue, you might have heard about that, Statue of Unity. So he made Statue of Equality, right? The Chinnajir, Statue of Equality. Why is everyone imitating the West? The traditional system, that the deities were in the temples, they would come out for festivals. Sri Rangam, they had this Brahmotsavam, Udupi is every day. Small deities, Utsava deities, they would go out. Jagannath Rathayatra Mahotsav, same thing. Jagannath comes out, goes to Gundicha. Sometimes he stays in the cart overnight, but he's not, out in the open. There's a canopy over Jagannath in the cart. So the deities are not supposed to be out like that. Prabhupada condemned that. But worship of political leaders. So they put Gandhi. So then they put, what was his name? Who started the DMK? No, Periyar also, but Anna Durai. And then now every Tom, Dick, and Harry, Nehru statue, this one, that one in India. They make, here also, statue, the South, until even now they probably still did. Robert E. Lee and other Confederate generals, right? They had the statues. But statue is a Western concept. Lenin statues, Marxist statues, they pulled down, right, in 1990. And where else? They pulled down a lot of statues in different places when communism went away. But the statues itself is not Vedic. It's this Western concoction. But India is imitating the West, unfortunately. So, if in Vedic culture, it's not supposed to be like that. The deities are worshipped in the temples. They're not supposed to be exposed to the birds defecating. And so Prabhupada commented, the Lord imparted instructions with full senses, and Arjuna received them with full senses, and thus there was a perfect exchange of sensible and logical understanding between the master and the disciple. So when we say Vedic knowledge is, acquired by memorization of Veda mantras, which Prabhupada did mention here, they were also explained by the study of the Vedangas. Grammar was one of the Vedangas. The knowledge of the Chandas was one of the Vedangas, prosody. So you had Chanda, Kalpa Sutra, how to perform sacrifice. Jyotisham, astronomy, not astrology, astronomy. There's a difference. So the Jyotisham is one of the Vedangas, which is an auspicious time, which Jayanti is only on Krishna Janmashtami. But in India now, any birthday, they call it Jayanti. One is your Jayanti. But actually, it's Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur pointed that out. Well, yeah, they've got Nehru Jayanti, Gandhi Jayanti, right? Indira Gandhi Jayanti. Gita Jayanti? Hanuman Jayanti? No. The day is bona fide. Gita Upadesha Dinam, you can say. But Jayanti is a nakshatra that is seen only on Krishna Janmashtami. That's the thing. It's nakshatra means a constellation. The constellation Jayanti is only visible on Krishna Janmashtami. Otherwise, it shouldn't. The word has been coined now. They borrowed the word. There are other such examples, right? Where it meaning is there's some other meaning, but they made a new meaning out of it. So we say Gita Jayanti because everybody else says Gita Jayanti. But otherwise, it's not actually Jayanti. How are we doing on time now? Time for questions? Well, okay. We can start the questions if you want. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna. So,
Slowly.
With regards to the point about about the only real Vedic industry was agriculture, and that
No, there was Gramodyog,
yeah.
village industries.
But the main
Like
occupation,
agriculture was done with a plow.
yes.
So they made the plow with the carpenters and the blacksmiths.
Blacksmiths, yeah.
They made the plow.
So, in our farm communities, sometimes it's seen or it's observed that harder to find devotees inclined to farming, actually like working on the land, tilling the land, and doing these things. One reason that was I heard was that because we are preaching this knowledge, and as expected, ours is supposed to be a little more of an intellectual society and a Brahminical society. And therefore, when we're establishing Varnashram farm communities, we struggle to get the required labor to run the different aspects of a Varnashram community, because Shudras run everything in Varnashrama, in terms of the labor, helping the other Varnas. But, everybody's a Vaishnava ultimately, but, the way we are preaching, like for instance, it generally appeals to the more intellectual class. It's like, especially in India, we can see, so many educated people, and things like that. So, any thoughts or ideas as to how that we may be able to overcome that obstacle? Or
Actually, the situation in many parts of India, there's no farm labor left. Everything is done by machines now. They eliminated the need, so then they all live in slums nearby factories and work in the factories. So that's very unfortunate. It's yad acharati shreshtaha. The common man followed the leaders. And when the leaders, the present Hindutva leaders are caught in a jam, right? Because they need votes. And votes is a bogus system. It's not the Vedic system. Vedic system was there was a king who was trained in both Vedas and Dhanurveda, military science. But how could that possibly, that old system, the kind of governments and the weapons that they've developed now, and they say it's a changed circumstance to a certain extent. So how do you do it? And then how do you revive the whole? The Shudras in the Vedic system, they didn't study Vedas. They just worked, right? And the people today, so-called peasants or agricultural or any labor, but they've been brought into the industrial labor force. But they're just laborers. They're just concerned with eating but because they've been given more independence now, so they use that independence for intoxication. Now, intoxication was there in Vedic times. It wasn't like there was no intoxication. There was no formal business of intoxication. They made it somehow. Like even from potatoes you can make liquor, right? So the low-class people are inclined to that. Low-class people are inclined That's in Shastras, that low-class people are inclined to intoxication and, prostitution and meat eating. You see very low-class people in India. I've seen on the side of the train carrying a pig that they killed. I saw this one time. The low-class people eat. Prabhupada has written like that, right? Lower and unimportant animals. But these things are in the mode of ignorance, tamasic. So if you have a little intellect, a Shudra can also have that intelligence. And there are many Shudra castes in India that are vegetarian. But they're mostly in Rajasthan and Gujarat, not in the south and in the central or in the east, somehow or other. But so there's a gap between the idea. Then the kings, they had, made sure people followed Dharma. How? By their example and even by force. If they saw some adharma, they were punished to be that. Prabhupada has written in other purports, right, that thieves and rogues should be killed by the king. Killed. No mercy. Thieves and it's the duty of the king to protect the citizens from thieves and rogues. And there was no prison system, right? There was no prison system in ancient, none that we read about in the Puranas, that people went to prison. If they were rogues and thieves, they would be killed. So there's no need to feed them for the rest of their life. But, the people were educated, and even the Shudras had the example of the king. The king was respected, that he followed Vedic principles. Now, one example is Ajamil, who gave up the Brahminical life and led the life of a rogue. And he wasn't killed by a king. So, it existed. A fisherman existed at the time of Lord Ramachandra, right? The Kevat. I mean, the Tulsi Ramayana is more or less the Valmiki Ramayana. There's some tinge of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga in that. But the story is the same. Only Lakshman Rekha is not in the Valmiki Ramayana. There's no, we use that example, that there's a Lakshman Rekha, right? Because it's common in India, everyone says that. Anyway, the people were inspired by the saintly kings, Rajarshis. Now there's no Rajarshi. So it's every man for himself. Now re-establishing the farms, Prabhupada had a hope. So some people are inspired by that, and some give a fig for that. They don't care. The whole New Vrindavan, Prabhupada's, that movie is there. Prabhupada told us to rely on nature's beauty and the cows, and went on for years in Prabhupada's presence. He also said it's not fit for human habitation, it's too cold up there. That's not being broadcast too much. But if you're going to do farming, you want to be in a place where it's warm and conducive, and there's water. Like Bengal, a lot of water, it's a delta. There's 3 crops a year. And in this cold country, Canada, there's a lot of agriculture, Really? But it's only 1 crop. Yeah, and Canada is a huge agricultural production up there. There's a lot of agriculture in Canada. Well, the so-called breadbasket of the U.S., the Great Plains, fantastic agriculture, but 1 crop. But fantastic, right? I mean, corn huskers, Iowa,
Yeah.
they feed it to the cows and kill the cows, unfortunately. That's what it is. It's a mass production of grains for the meat industry, for the slaughter industry. But the land is good. The land is fertile. But it's only 1 crop. And Bengal, the Andhra coastal districts, Tirunelveli means beautiful rice fields, right? So there's a lot of agriculture in India, at least 2 crops. And in the places but there are also, because of those 3 crops, there's a huge population. It can sustain huge population by comparison. Anyway, Prabhupada had the hope. In Hyderabad, he got this land. He put senior disciples there, he had this aspiration that we would have farm projects. So some of his disciples believed that, and some condemn it. It's shocking. How can you condemn it when Prabhupada propagated that? He propagated it practically from New Vrindavan and Hyderabad in his lifetime. Any other questions? I'm sure there are.
So, we understand that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to go towards, Vedic culture, Vedic style of living. But also there's this impression, often when you try to bring up some of these cultural aspects, I mean, of course, one has to do it with consideration, like you mentioned, whether, the recipient is able to take it up at this point of time without affecting their Krishna consciousness. But even when we bring up these kind of things, the argument is, well, did Prabhupada do it? Did Prabhupada introduce it? Once I was speaking to one devotee,
Right.
and I was saying how it would be nice for women to learn Rangoli, because it is a Vedic culture. Rangoli is...
all over South India and Maharashtra also. Gujarat, they don't do it. It's the Panchadravida. Bengal women don't do that. They don't do it, but Maharashtra they do.
Because
And
the word
in South
Rangoli
India-
is a North
It's a
Indian
Sanskrit word.
It's
a Sanskrit
yeah,
word.
but-
Yeah. Ranga is color.
Yeah,
So yeah, Rangoli is not Sanskrit as such. It's like Hindi.
yeah.
But anyway, whatever you call it in Tamil Nadu, they don't call it Rangoli.
Yeah,
do
we
they?
call it kolam. Yeah.
Right. So there are the 64 arts. That's like one of the 64 arts, decoration, right?
Right. So when I bring this up, they say, well, Prabhupada didn't say that his women have to learn that. So why do they have to learn?
See,
So
there were many things Prabhupada said that many of the disciples didn't hear. Like how many of his disciples were in Hyderabad when he told 10,000 people, I was one of them, please don't give up your culture. He, told the people, please don't give up your culture. What did it mean? That means that he was a follower of that culture. He advocated that culture. That was Vedic culture, Indian culture. Please don't give up your culture. It's still there in my mind, but there's 1,000 excuses not to follow Vedic culture, not to imbibe it or learn it. There's, that won't end because what's the reason? The rubbish goes in the ears and they accept that rubbish. I mean, Prabhupada had the newspaper read to him every day when Indira Gandhi's government fell. It's not like we're totally against reading the newspaper, but we shouldn't make it our sole engagement or, our even everyday habit. It's not as important as reading the Vedic literature and the Bhagavatam, obviously. But we shouldn't be ignorant of what's going on in the world. But people get affected by that. Like Prabhupada had a servant who couldn't believe that when Prabhupada said they didn't go to the moon, he just, he left.
Yeah.
He left Prabhupada. So, even if they went to the moon, how did it benefit humanity? Look at the costs, right? So how much money they spent, and what was the fruit of that?
Nothing.
Rocks, a display of rocks. That's even no proof that they went. I mean, just by simple logic and reason. All they had to show is rocks. It's a confidence game, right? It's a confidence game. The Music Man, the movie from 1962. I was 7 years old. The Music Man is a story of a person who called himself a professor. He went in a town in Iowa, and the people were very conservative, but he made a scheme to cheat them by saying that you need musical instruments and give me the money, I'll purchase them, and your sons will be saved from playing the pool, billiards. And so anyway, that's the story. He wanted to cheat everybody. So this is the government cheating the public. So when you have a government like that, no wonder the people become atheistic. You know, they're cheated by the government. But the propaganda is still going on. NASA did the space, this thing, that Apollo, and you know, I can't remember all the names. It's a huge budget of millions and millions of dollars being spent for that stuff. But they won't give free medical treatment, right, to the people. They won't give free medical treatment. You have to have insurance or Hare Krishna. You gotta go. Any other question? Yes.
You were speaking about how statues, you know, putting them outside, you know,
Right.
crows defecate on them. And how do we understand gopurams? You know, on the gopuram, you know, we see so
Right.
many.
There's
And I'm sure like birds defecate on there too. So
yeah,
how
so
do
there
we-
shouldn't be deities carved on the gopurams. It can just be a well. There, see, you can say, why should you have a temple building? The crows are going to pass stool on it, but there's no deities. So yeah, there are some gopurams with no deities.
I mean, most of the gopurams
Have some
I mean,
deities,
like
yeah.
traditionally. So like, how do we understand it according to?
There's things that they depict there that we don't talk about, right? On some of the gopurams.
Yeah, but in Srirangam also they, you know.
The Ramanuja sect,
Yeah.
they put deities on the gopurams.
So how do we understand that?
It's wrong. What can I say? See, the gopuram might be tall and big, and they don't need to put a deity there, is it? There's no need. Maybe there's not deities of God, but you're right. Like in Tirupati, you go around the Vimanam, not the gopuram, and in the Vimanam there's a little Balaji there, and everybody sees that. They put a kind of an arch over that Balaji, and that's carved into it's gold. I don't know if it's actually carved in the stone, but it's gold plated. And they put a little silver arch, and then you look at that little deity there. How can I explain it? It's hard to understand. Yeah, it seems contradictory. Ideally, the deity should not be outside. Ideally. Now, the Chinnajir is propagating Vaishnavism. Whatever he is, isn't it? He's propagating Vishnu Bhakti. He's eccentric. He's not so traditional like the other Jirs of other. Their Jirs there's some with a mutt and some without a mutt. But he's a bit. Have you ever seen him give a lecture? He doesn't sit in one place and give a lecture. He moves around the stage like, you know, he's some kind of entertainer. That's what entertainers do. Traditionally, lectures are given, someone is sitting, the audience is listening. Whether it's ISKCON, the Gaudiya Math, or a Brahmin who's giving Bhagavad Katha, Mayavadi, Shakta, Shaiva, this, that. Probably the Buddhists also. The Jains, they all sit down. You want to hear something, you got to sit down. Lecture in a university. They're all sitting and the professor is teaching. But moving around on a stage and talking and sometimes sitting, sometimes standing, sometimes walking, it's an entertainment business. That's what the entertainers do, right? I mean, some stand in one place, the stand-up people, and they give a few lines, but there's others that move around on the stage. It's not traditional. So, but he's still, you know, if you want to be Gunagrahi and see the good qualities, then he has a lot of good qualities. He's a Vaishnava at the end of the day. How many Vaishnavas are there?
Ananta.
Pardon?
He said Ananta Koti Vaishnava.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda.
Right. That's a Tamil singing.
You know,
I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
my point is that some people are not ideal. Okay, and these things are, Prabhupada, why would he say like that? That, you know, the statues outside, he commented, very well known. I'm not making it up.
So then having Sudarshana on top of the temple, is that
Oops. That's bona fide. It's a symbol of, actually Sudarshan is not Vishnu.
Yes.
Although Ramanuja Sampradaya, some people say it, but Prabhupada says this is the energy of Vishnu. So the jivas are energy of Vishnu. But it's a symbol that shows you it's a Vishnu temple. If there's a Sudarshan chakra everywhere, Puri, every Vaishnava temple has a chakra.
And we also, when we read the Krishna book, we understand that there's prostitutes of Dwaraka who are pure devotees of Krishna.
Who was Kubja? That was Mathura, wasn't Dwarka.
Yeah.
Who was Kubja? So there's an explanation by acharyas that she was an expansion of Krishna's external energy. Or internal, I can't remember, and I think it was the external energy. But what was her occupation? And Pingala is in the Bhagavatam. And yeah, the society ladies of Dwarka are mentioned. You know, they say prostitution is as old as the hills. That means it's as old as human society. So they're not considered honorable or respectable. But at the same time, well, Chintamani Gurur May, what is it?
Bilvamangal.
Bilvamangal accepted the prostitute as a Pata Pradashaka Guru, not a Diksha Guru, a Pata Pradashaka who showed the path. So, there's both. Prostitution is condemnable. A woman is supposed to have only one husband. I can't mention anything personally, but because of the ethos of Protestant Christianity, a woman remarrying after she has children is commonly accepted here, but not in Vedic culture, in Hindu culture. A woman who has a child cannot remarry. Or a widow could remarry if she had no children or if she didn't see her husband. How could a woman not see her husband? Because they were married in childhood and they weren't sent to the husband until both of them were, reached physical maturity. They could have children. There's a logic in that Vedic culture that if a girl is very young and strong, childbearing is not a problem. And when the woman gets older, then the body gets weaker. Childbearing requires a lot of strength. So if you wait longer, it's difficult for the woman to, but there are women who had children up to the age of 50 because they had that habit, right? They had one after the other child. There are families in India where there's one woman who has 13 children, right? You've heard of that. Even here there are some. It depends on their community. And then the atheists, they don't want children. It's artificial. And those who don't have children, they're unhappy. The majority. If you're a renunciate, you wanted to get away from family life. But not the vast majority of people. They're not going to be renunciates. It's wonderful. Bhishma. When Bhishma, actually his name was Devavrata, right? Devavrata. When he said, I'll remain a brahmachari lifelong, everyone was shocked. And the demigods also expressed Bhishma means terrible. So the vast majority will be householders, but there's a certain morality there. But if someone doesn't observe that, so Prabhupada quoted Chanakya, there are 4 enemies in the family. Mata Vyabhicharini, a mother who is a prostitute. But Vyabhichar means irreligious behavior, technically. And that means having one after the husbands or multiple relationships. Here they call it relationships, right? But this is the world we live in. Because the world is an atheistic world. So, Pita Rini, if the father is a debtor, he took money on loan and didn't pay it back, he's an enemy. Why? Because the son is responsible for the father in Vedic culture. Nowadays, they're not here, they're not responsible. Your father went into debt and you don't have to pay that back. But not in Vedic culture. And then Putra Apandita, a son who's a fool. He didn't study Vedas. So this was Chanakya Pandit. And then Mata, Rupavati Bharya, a beautiful wife is considered an enemy. Why? Because everyone wants to enjoy that woman. And so she may also, because she's a woman who's very beautiful, many men pursue her, isn't it? And, illicit relationships happen because of that. So if a man's wife is too beautiful, that's a liability, an enemy. This is what Chanakya said, enemy. Prabhupada also said every man thinks his wife is the most beautiful woman, So it's like...
she's always an enemy.
Always an enemy.
So I'm just clarifying, is that what you're saying?
No, actually the wife is the greatest friend. That's the Vedic concept.
That's better.
That's the Vedic concept. But of course, Krishna is the greatest friend, we say, but we're in the material body. People will say, well, I'm not this body. Yeah, but you're in the body. You may not be the body, but you're in the body due to prarabdha karmas and desires, past karmas and desires. So you can't deny the body, but you know it's a temporary vehicle. Like a car, it gets old, you change cars, you change bodies, change clothes. Okay, that time. Time for prasad, right? Oh, it's still time.
Good. It doesn't.
Okay, Grantaraj Shri, there's a question?
Could I ask?
Okay, yeah. Mike is coming, just now coming. A Mike and an Asan.
Hi, Krishna. Sorry, I will be quick, but it's just something that's really relevant right now. But you were talking about modern education and how it's even crept into like ISKCON's kind of style of education in different places. And
Yeah.
I recently had the opportunity to, I won't say which community, but I recently had the opportunity to
I think bend the
assist.
mic towards you, right.
To assist in a classroom just for one day. So, I only got to see a few hours. And it was a devotee school, and it was only preschool, so I'm sure primary and things are indifferent. And it was very sweet. They start off with the Vastakam and shlokas from Bhagavad Gita, but just you were talking about this devotee Vaishnava culture. You dress a certain way, you eat a certain way, the genders interact in a certain way, mostly not at all. But in these classes, and I don't want to be offensive by any means, I'm just going to say what I was experiencing was, all the kids are all kind of grouped together, and, my experiences when I walked in the school, you like right away smell onion and garlic, which was like right away kind of like, okay, that's strange, It was just a resident that was living there, and, I was in the kitchen a little, so it was like vegetable broth, which isn't a huge deal, but it's just like little things. And then,
In a devotee community?
yeah. And then, and this is like the driving force for most grahastas, right, is to go towards a community for their children to go to school. And another thing was, the kids, no one's dressed, like the kids are all in Western clothing, everyone's, so what do you do? Like if you have children, if you're a grahastha, you have to go to India, you have to go to Mayapur, you have to go to Vrindavan, or do you just have to homeschool and like kind of seclude your kids if you want them to take on this? Because even if you teach them
this
this
is
culture,
a very practical dilemma that you're talking about.
yeah. Well, even if you teach them the culture,
There is no easy solution for that. If you want to raise, see, like we drove from Delaware to, we drove when we came back from Buffalo, New York, to Delaware. So you drive through rural Pennsylvania and you see these Amish going in the horse carts. And the horse carts are kind of modern looking. They're not manufactured in a big factory, but they're enclosed with glass doors, but it's a horse cart. And they maintain their dress. So it's a question of willpower. The Amish are one sect. How many of you know Sukadev Swami?
No.
You don't know Sukadev Maharaj? He's in Nellore, right? He was a medical doctor here. He's a Telugu Reddy by caste. He joined in 1984. So he's an old devotee. He's like my age, old man now. So he sent me some news. There are some splinter group of devotees where they've taken sannyas on their own and they started initiating on their own and they've started fighting with each other. Right? Heavy fight broke out. So Sukadev Maharaj posted this on some WhatsApp group and then he sent me personally also. So, I wrote back, I was totally ignorant that they were taking sannyas and giving initiation. And then I wrote sect, subsect, sub-subsect. I mean, it's like that. What are the Amish? Originally, there was the Catholic Church, and then there was this church, that church, the other church, and there's 1,000 churches. And even in Vedic culture, and even in Vaishnavism, the Ramanuja sect has 2 divisions.
Tengalai.
You know that, right? Tengalai, Vadagalai, the north and the south. The Tengalai, the south, they put the tilak like us on the nose, and the Vadagalai they don't put on the nose. You never noticed that, right? Did you go to Sri Rangam or Tirupati? You haven't gone there. Okay. Who's gone there? Only you. So, and then, in Gaudiya, this tilak, Smarta Brahmins also wear. Did you know that? But they don't put this. They put Gopi Chandan, Urdhva Pundram, but they're Smarta Brahmins. Not all Smarta Brahmins, some. They have the Tripundra and Urdhva Pundra. How do you make sense of it all? Faith. So, there's a personal will and then there's a collective will. You have to find like-minded people to make a community. How the Amish made their... Now, there are people that leave the Amish, or there's people that leave the Hasidic Jews. They made a TV show of one woman. She divorced her husband. She remarried some guy in New York. She's encouraging her children to leave their traditional sect. Now, all of these Christian sects, by the way, they're all non-vegetarian. So we believe they're all in the mode of ignorance. They kill animals. That we cannot condone at all. But there are certain parallels, determination to follow religious principles. We can be gunagrahi, we can see that that's a good quality. Now, how did they do it? How did they maintain? It's a small group. Most of the people surrendered to, and we too, we use the cars, Prabhupada used the cars and the planes, isn't it? How do you travel all over the world? The Andavan Swami of the Ramanuja sect, there's a mutt called the Srimad Andavan Mutt. And the old Andavans, they only walked. Kanchi Shankaracharya, you saw Sringeri, but the Kanchi, who passed away 25 years ago, only walk. So whether they're Vaishnava or Smarta, the Jains, they still only walk. Not all Jains though. There's a picture of Prabhupada with that Sushil Muni, the Jain Muni with the, has a mask. You've seen that picture? Yogi Bhajan Singh, Sardarji, who has a big following in New Mexico. He's long gone. His son is an old man now. And Sushil, when they met in San Francisco, there's a picture of the 3 of them in San Francisco in 1975. And I met Sushil Muni in 1980 in Delhi. And I said, Jain sadhus don't take a bath every day. He said, no, who told you that? I take a bath every day. So actually, traditional Jain sadhus, they don't take a bath because they don't want to kill the microbes. So then they pluck hair. They don't shave, they pluck their hair out. You see these Jain Muni, the Jains are it's very tamasic actually.
Yeah.
It's tamasic. But they have a certain logic, a certain ideology. I don't know, who's a Jain Muni? There's very few. They're there. So anyway, sorry for, seems like tangential. How do you pronounce it?
Tangential.
Tangential. Seems like I got off on a tangent, but if you want to do it here in this country, Sangha Shakti, you've heard this expression? The power in a group. That's what you have here in this temple. So you need to forge that type of a power. It's not easy. It's pioneering, you know. But in India, it's tough too. Like Prabhupada wanted that Hyderabad farm, didn't succeed. Then what happened? Somehow some devotees kept 50 acres. And then there was a guy who raised funds for many years, and he's old now, and he kept Western cows. He didn't keep the, you know, now we have, at the time of Prabhupada praised the Western cows. But later on in India, they developed the thing that the indigenous cows should be protected. And there's also in Vedic literature description of cows, and the Western cows don't have those character, the drooping ears and the dewlap and the hump on the back. So is there a difference? Should we kill those cows? We don't kill buffaloes also. We take buffalo's milk, and buffalo's yogurt and ghee is supposed to be okay. But even milk, everybody drinks buffalo milk in India, more or less. So anyway, you know, you can do what you can do, type of thing. You know, some people got inspired. There's a couple communities where farming, and there's more coming up. Some of my god brothers, not one in particular, but there are two in particular, who are encouraging their disciples to do farming and agricultural rural projects, but not many. And then Shivaram Swami, we all know, has his farm in Hungary, which I visited for 2 nights 10.5 years ago. And you know, he's got 600 acres of land and 150 devotees. It's not a lot of people in the world, you know, but it's more than just one couple. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So it's up to you, you know.
Vishnu said if there's any more questions, we can take them.
All right.
So if there's any more questions,
You want to keep going on?
yeah, Vishnu Prabhu said we could. Are there any more questions?
We are eager for prasadam.
Okay, so
I'm not particularly eager for heavy grains in the morning, but I think everybody else might be.
Something light today.
Pardon?
Light today.
It's light today? Oh, that's good. That's good news. Well, I don't mind answering more questions. I think we had a good discussion.
does anyone have questions?
I see tomorrow and the next day there's some book distribution marathon going on.
Yeah, something.
That's good. Okay. Grantaraj.